Chapter 22. The next morning there was a long account in the most important newspaper saying in only a small paragraph that Thomas Ripley was missing, but saying very boldly that Richard Greenleaf was exposing himself to suspicion of participation in the murder of Miles, and that he must be considered as evading the problem unless he represented himself to be cleared of suspicion. The paper also mentioned the forged checks. It said that the last communication from Richard Greenleaf had been his letter to the Bank of Naples, attesting that no forgeries had been committed against him. But 2 experts out of 3 in Naples said that they believe Signor Greenleaf's January and February checks were forgeries, concurring with the opinion of Signor Greenleaf's American bank, which has sent photostats of his signatures back to Naples. The newspaper ended on a slightly facetious note. Can anybody commit a forgery against himself? Or is the wealthy American shielding one of his friends? To hell with them, Tom thought. Dickie's own handwriting changed often enough. He had seen it on an insurance policy among Dickie's papers, and he had seen it in Mongebello, right in front of his eyes. Let them drag out everything he had signed in the last 3 months, and see where it got them. They apparently hadn't noticed that the signature on his letters from Palermo was a forgery too. The only thing that really interested him was whether the police had found anything that actually incriminated Dickie in the murder of Freddie Miles. And he could hardly say that that really interested him personally. He bought Oggi and Epoca at the newsstands at the corner of San Marcos. They were tabloid-sized weeklies full of photographs, full of anything from murder to flagpole sitting, anything spectacular that was happening anywhere. There was nothing in them yet about the missing Dickie Greenleaf. Maybe next week, he thought, but they wouldn't have any photographs of him in them anyway. Marge had taken pictures of Dickie in Mongebello, but she had never taken one of him. On his ramble around the city that morning, he bought some rimmed glasses at a shop that sold toys and gadgets for practical jokers. The lenses were of plain glass. He visited San Marcos Cathedral and looked all around inside without seeing anything, but it was not the fault of the glasses. He was thinking that he had to identify himself immediately. It would look worse for him, whatever happened, the longer he put it off. When he left the cathedral, he inquired of a policeman where the nearest police station was. He asked it sadly. He felt sad. He was not afraid, but he felt that identifying himself as Thomas Phelps Ripley was going to be one of the saddest things he had ever done in his life. "You are Thomas Ripley?" the captain of police asked, with no more interest than if Tom had been a dog and had been lost and was now found. "May I see your passport?" Tom handed it to him. "I don't know what the trouble is, but when I saw in the papers that I believe I was missing, it was all dreary, just as it had anticipated." Policemen standing around blank-faced, staring at him. "What happens now?" Tom asked to the officer. "I shall telephone to Rome," the officer answered calmly and picked up the telephone on his desk. There was a few minutes' wait for the Rome line, and then in an impersonal voice the officer announced to someone in Rome that the American Thomas Ripley was in Venice. More inconsequential exchanges. Then the officer said to Tom, "They would like to see you in Rome. Can you go to Rome today?" Tom frowned. "I wasn't planning to go to Rome." "I shall tell them," the officer said mildly, and spoke into the telephone again. Now he was arranging for the Rome police to come to him. Being an American citizen still commanded certain privileges, Tom supposed. "At what hotel are you staying?" the officer asked. "At the Costanza." The officer gave this piece of information to Rome. Then he hung up and informed Tom politely that a representative of the Rome police would be in Venice that evening after 8 o'clock to speak to him. "Thank you," Tom said, and turned his back on the dismal figure of the officer writing on his form sheet. It had been a very boring little scene. Tom spent the rest of the day in his room, quietly thinking, reading, and making further small alterations in his appearance. He thought it quite possible that they would send the same man who spoke to him in Rome, Tenente Rovassini, of whatever his name was. He made his eyebrows a trifle darker with a lead pencil. He lay around all afternoon in his brown tweed suit and even pulled a button off the jacket. Dickie had been rather on the neat side, so Tom Ripley was going to be notably sloppy by contrast. He ate no lunch, not that he wanted any anyway, but he wanted to continue losing the few pounds he had added for the role of Dickie Greenleaf. He would make himself thinner than he had ever been before as Tom Ripley. His weight on his own passport was 155. Dickie was 168, though they went the same height, 6 feet 1 1/2. At 8:30 that evening, his telephone rang, and the switchboard operator announced that Tenente Roverini was downstairs. "Would you have him come up, please?" Tom said. Tom went to the chair that he intended to sit in and drew it still farther back from the circle of light cast by the standing lamp. The room was arranged to look as if he had been reading and killing time for the last few hours. The standing lamp and a tiny reading lamp were on. The counterpane was not smooth. A couple of books laid open face down, as he had even begun a letter on the writing table, a letter to Aunt Dottie. The tenente knocked. Tom opened the door in a languid way. "Buonasera." "Buonasera, Tenente Roverini della Polizia Romana." The tenente's homely, smiling face did not look at least surprised or suspicious. Behind him came another tall, silent young police officer. Not another, Tom realized suddenly, but the one who had been at the tenente when Tom first met Roverini in the apartment in Rome. The officer sat down in the chair Tom offered him under the light. "You are a friend of Signor Richard Greenleaf?" he asked. "Yes," Tom said, down in the other chair, an armchair that he could slouch in. "When did you last see him, and where?" "I saw him briefly in Rome, just before he went to Sicily." "And did you hear from him when he was in Sicily?" The tenente was writing it all down in a notebook that he had taken from his brown briefcase. "No, I didn't hear from him." "Aha!" the tenente said. He was spending more time looking at his papers than at Tom. Finally, he looked up with a friendly, interested expression. "You did not know when you were in Rome that the police wanted to see you?" "No, I did not know that. I cannot understand why I am said to be missing." He adjusted his glasses and peered at the man. "I shall explain later, Signor Greenleaf did not tell you in Rome that the police wanted to speak to you?" "No." "Strange," he remarked quietly, making another notation. "Signor Greenleaf knew that we wanted to speak to you. Signor Greenleaf is not very cooperative." He smiled at Tom. Tom kept his face serious and attentive. "Signor Ripley, where have you been since the end of November?" "I have been traveling. I have been mostly in the north of Italy." Tom made his Italian clumsy, with a mistake here and there, and with quite a different rhythm from Dickie's Italian. "Where?" The tenente gripped his pen again. "Milano, Torino, Faenza, Pisa." "We have inquired at the hotels in Milano and Faenza, for example. Did you stay all the time with friends?" "No, I slept quite often in my car." It was obvious that he hadn't a great deal of money, Tom thought, and also that he was the kind of young man who would prefer to rough it with a guidebook and a volume of Soloni or Dante than to stay in a fancy hotel. "I am sorry that I did not renew my permesso di soggiorno," Tom said contritely. "I did not know that it was such a serious matter." But he knew the tourists in Italy almost never took the trouble to renew their soggiorno, and staying for a month after stating on entering the country that they intended to be there for only a few weeks. "Permesso di soggiorno," the tenente said in a tone of gentle, almost paternal correction. "Oh, grazie. May I see your passport?" Tom produced it from his inside jacket pocket. The tenente studied the picture closely while Tom assumed the faintly anxious expression, the firmly parted lips of the passport photograph. The glasses were missed from the photograph, but his hair was parted in the same manner, and his tie was tied in the same loose triangular knot. The tenente glanced at the few stamped entries that only partially filled the first 2 pages of the passport. "You have been in Italy since October 2nd, except for the short trip to France with Signor Greenleaf." "Yes." The tenente smiled, a pleasant Italian smile now, and leaned forward on his knee. "Ebbene. This settles one important matter, the mystery of San Remo boat." Tom frowned. "What is that?" A boat was found sunken there with some stains that were believed to be blood stains. Naturally, when you were missing, so far as we knew, immediately after San Remo, he threw his hands out and laughed. We thought it might have been advisable to ask Senor Greenleaf what had happened to you, which we did. The boat was missed the same day, and you two were in San Remo. He laughed again. Tom pretended not to see the joke. But did not Senor Greenleaf tell you that I went to Mongebello after San Remo? I did some, he groped for a word, little labors for him. Benone, Tenente Roverini said, smiling. He loosened his brass-buttoned overcoat comfortably and rubbed a finger back and forth across the crisp, bushy mustache. Did you also know Frederic Milles? He asked. Tom gave an involuntary sigh because the boat incident was apparently closed. No, I only met him once when he was getting off the bus in Mongebello. I never saw him again. Aha, said the tenente, taking this in. He was silent a moment, as if he had run out of questions. Then he smiled. Ah, Mongebello, a beautiful village, is it not? My wife comes from Mongebello. Ah, indeed, Tom said pleasantly. See, my wife and I went there on our honeymoon. A most beautiful village, Tom said. Grazie. He accepted the Nazionale that the tenente offered him. Tom felt that this was perhaps a polite Italian interlude, a rest between rounds. They were surely going to get into Dickie's private life, the forged checks and all of that. Tom said seriously in his plodding Italian, I have read in the newspaper that the police think that Senor Greenleaf might be guilty of the murder of Freddie Miles if he does not present himself. Is it true that they think he is guilty? Ah, no, 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 the tenente protested, but it's imperative that he present himself. Why is he hiding from us? I don't know. As you say, he is not very cooperative, Tom commented solemnly. He was not enough cooperative to tell me in Rome that the police wanted to speak to me, but at the same time I cannot believe it is possible that he killed Freddie Miles. But you see, a man has said in Rome that he saw two men standing beside the car of Signor Milles across the street from the house of Signor Greenleaf, and that they were both drunk, or he paused for effect, looking at Tom. Perhaps one man was dead because the other was holding him up beside the car. Of course, we cannot say that the man who was being supported was Signor Milles or Signor Greenleaf, he added, but if we could find Signor Greenleaf, we could at least ask him if he was so drunk that Signor Milles had to hold him up. He laughed. It is very serious matter. Yes, I can see that. You have absolutely no idea where Signor Greenleaf might be at this moment? No, absolutely no. The tenente mused. Signor Greenleaf and Signor Milles has no quarrel that you know of. No, but? Tom continued slowly, doing it just right. I know that Dickie did not go to a ski party that Freddie Miles had invited him to. I remember that I was surprised that he had not gone. He did not tell me why. I know about the ski party in Cortina d'Ampezzo. Are you sure there was no woman involved? Tom's sense of humor tugged at him, but he pretended to think this one more carefully. I do not think so. What about the girl, Marjorie Sherwood? Well, I suppose it is possible, Tom said, but I do not think so. I am perhaps not the person to answer questions about Signor Greenleaf's personal life. Signor Greenleaf never talked to you about his affairs of the heart? The tenente asked with a Latin astonishment. He could lead them on indefinitely, Tom thought. Marge would back it up, just by the emotional way she would react to questions about Dickie, and the Italian police could never get to the bottom of Signor Greenleaf's emotional involvements. He hadn't been able to himself. No, Tom said, I cannot say that Dickie ever talked to me about his own personal life. I know he was very fond of Marjorie, he added. She also knew Freddie Miles. How well did she know him? Well, Tom acted as if he might say more if he chose. The tenente leaned forward. Since you lived for a time with Signor Greenleaf in Mongebello, you are perhaps in a position to tell us about Signor Greenleaf's attachments in general. They are most important. Why don't you speak to Signorina Sherwood? Tom suggested. We have spoken to her in Rome. Before Signor Greenleaf disappeared, I have arranged to speak to her again when she comes to Genoa to embark for America. She now is in Munich. Tom waited, silent. The tenente was waiting for him to contribute something more. Tom felt quite comfortable now. It was good, just as he had hoped in his most optimistic moments. The police held nothing against him at all, and they suspected him of nothing. Tom felt suddenly innocent and strong, as free of guilt as his old suitcase from which he had carefully scrubbed the demonimento sticko from the Palermo baggage room. He said in his earnest, careful, Ripley-like way, "I remember that Marjorie said for a while in Montebello that she would not go to Cortina, and later she changed her mind, but I do not know why, if that could mean anything." "But she never went to Cortina." "No, but only because Signor Greenleaf did not go, I think. At least Signorina Sherwood liked him so much that she would not go alone on a holiday after she expected to go on the holiday with him." "Do you think they had a quarrel, Signor Melez and Greenleaf, about Signorina Sherwood?" "I cannot say. It is possible. I know that Signor Miles was very fond of her, too." "Aha!" The tenente frowned, trying to figure all that out. He glanced up at the young policeman, who was evidently listening, though from his mobile face he had nothing to contribute. While he had said, gave a picture of Dickie as a sullen lover, Tom thought unwilling to let Marge go to Cortina to have some fun, because she liked Freddie Miles too much. The idea of anybody, Marge especially, liking the wall-eyed ox in preference to Dickie made Tom smile. He turned the smile into an expression of non-comprehension. "Do you actually think Dickie is running away from something, or do you think it is an accident that you cannot find him?" "Oh, no, this is too much. First, the matter of the checks. You perhaps know about that from the newspaper." "I do not completely understand about the checks," the officer explained. He knew the dates of the checks and the numbers of people who believed they were forged. He explained that Signor Greenleaf had denied the forgeries, but when the bank wished to see him again about a forgery against himself, and also the police in Rome wished to see him again about the murder of his friend, he suddenly vanished. The tenente threw out his hand. "That can only mean that he is running away from us." "You don't think someone may have murdered him?" Tom said softly. The officer shrugged, holding his shoulder up under his ear for at least a quarter of a minute. "I do not think so. The facts are not like that, not quite." "Ebbene. We have checked by radio every boat of any size with passengers which have left from Italy. He had either taken a small boat, and it as much have been as small as a fishing boat, or else he is hiding still in Italy, or of course anywhere else in Europe, because we do not ordinarily take the names of people leaving our country, and Signor Greenleaf had several days in which to leave. In any case, he is hiding. In any case, he acts guilty. Something is the matter." Tom stared gravely at the man. "Did you ever see Signor Greenleaf sign any of those remittance, in particular the remittance of January and February?" "I saw him sign one of them," Tom said, "but I'm afraid it was in December. I was not with him in January or February. Do you seriously suppose that he might have killed Signor Miles?" Tom asked again, incredulously. "He has no actual alibi," the officer replied. "He says he was talking and taking a walk after Signor Melez departed, but nobody saw him taking that walk." He pointed a finger at Tom suddenly. "And we have learned from the friend of Signor Melez, a Signor Van Houston, that Signor Melez had a difficult time finding Signor Greenleaf in Rome, as if Signor Greenleaf were trying to hide from him. Signor Greenleaf might have been angry with Signor Melez, though according to Signor Van Houston, Signor Melez was not at all angry with Signor Greenleaf." "I see," Tom said. "Ecco," the tenente said conclusively. He was staring at Tom's hand, or at least Tom imagined that he was staring at his hands. Tom had his own ring on again, but did the tenente possibly notice some resemblance? Tom boldly thrust his hand forward to the ashtray and put out his cigarette. "Ebbene," the tenente said, standing up. "Thank you so much for your help, Signor Ripley. You are one of the very few people from whom we can find out about Signor Greenleaf's personal life. In Montebello, the people he knew are extremely quiet. An Italian trait, alas. You know, afraid of the police, he chuckled. I hope we can reach you more easily the next time we have questions to ask you. Stay in the city a little more and in the country a little less, unless, of course, you are addicted to our countryside. I am, Tom said heartily. In my opinion, Italy is the most beautiful country of Europe. But if you like, I shall keep in touch with you in Rome, so you will always know where I am. I am as much interested as you in finding my friend. He said it as if his innocent mind had already forgotten the possibility that Dickie could be a murderer. The tenente handed him a card with his name and the address of the headquarters in Rome. He bowed. Grazie tante, signor Ripley. Buonasera. Buonasera, Tom said. The young policeman saluted him as he went out, and Tom gave him a nod and closed the door. He could have flown like a bird out of the window with spread arms. The idiots, all around the things they never guessed at. Never guessing that Dickie was running from the forgery question because he wasn't Dickie Greenleaf in the first place. The one thing they were right about was that Dickie Greenleaf might have killed Freddie Miles, but Dickie Greenleaf was dead as a doornail, and he, Tom Ripley, was safe. He picked up the phone. Would you give me the Grand Hotel, please? He said in Tom Ripley's Italian. Il ristorante per piacere. Would you reserve a table for one at 9:30, please? Thank you. The name is Ripley. Oh, yes. R-I-P-L-E-Y. Tonight he was going to have a dinner and look out at the moonlight on the Grand Canal and watch the gondolas drifting as lazily as they ever drifted for any honeymooner, with the gondoliers and their oars silhouetted against the moonlit water. He was suddenly ravenous. He was going to have something luscious and expensive to eat, whatever the Grand Hotel's specialty was, breast of pheasant or petti di pollo, or perhaps cannelloni to begin with, in a creamy sauce over delicate pasta, and a good Valpolicella to sip while he dreamed about the future and planned where he went from here. He had a bright idea while he was changing his clothes he ought to have an envelope in his possession on which should be written that it was not to be opened for several months to come. Inside it should be a will signed by Dickie, bequeathing him his money and his income. Now that would be an idea.